We're live. Hello. Welcome to Cyber Witch. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our weekly live stream, Interdimensional Discussions. So today the topic is something that Amelia and I were talking amongst ourselves about the other day, which is this idea of the hinging point in your spiritual practice and how that could change and how it's very fundamental. So do you want to explain to people what you meant by that?
Yeah, but what I mean by hinging, and anybody that's watching that's like taking my classes, a lot of it's like hinging upon something that is relevant and makes sense to you. You know what I mean? Like it's like take for example, like with me, like yes, I might write about Arabic things and sometimes Hebrew things, but that's what I've hinged upon. Like I've hinged upon my personal gnosis to something that's like tangible for me to understand, and which was really found within the Arabic, and what you're finding within like Hinduism and more of the Vedic studies is that you have a place to bring all of your study, and it falls upon like a real workable system. And it's quite beautiful when somebody finds something that they can hinge what they're doing and explain like kind of how like we can talk about demons and angels, but like in Hinduism, they have the Asuras and the Devas, and in Islam, they have the jinn and the shayateen and, the angels, and they have all these different types of things, but it allows us to be able to like take our perspective and be able to hinge it on something that's already been rather solidified. It doesn't mean that you have to like blindly follow the system or the religion or something like that. It just more means that like having something to hinge upon strengthen your actual connection of understanding what the spirits are telling you, what interdimensional entities are telling you, why the mantra is working properly, etc. You know what I mean? And having that foundation is I feel extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And these things definitely change over time, especially when you realize like what actually works, what doesn't work. And for a lot of us in the West, it's often going to be starting off as something based in like Abrahamic religion, in like an occultist sense of finding the mysteries of those things that like you can easily kind of find and learn about. And then you discover like, oh, like, is this actually right for me? Am I actually benefiting from doing these things? What can I learn from this that actually does teach me about the cosmic mind? And then what is a bunch of like spiritual blinds that are meant to kind of trick or deceive people, have you go down various rabbit holes, or even just feed off of your energy. And there's so much of that.
Yeah. And that's kind of why personally, like I've kind of fell upon like, yes, I have my own system and I have my own books and stuff like that, but it's good to have what I call like a lens, and we understand things from like not only English, but maybe from a different language or a different letters perspective of understanding words and perspectives. We can build like a greater understanding of what's really going on, so like take for example like extraterrestrials, like we talk about ETs a lot, or interdimensionals. To me, that's no different than asuras and devas and jinn. Like when you read like the old texts of the Islamic and the Hinduism, is they're not too different from what they're talking about. They just call them asuras, they call them devas, they call them jinn. They the different term because of the different language, and I think that's because of the massive amount of like letter work I've done, and certain shadow aspects of that. It's interesting to see the different dialects talking about the same thing throughout the whole thing. So that's where it comes upon hinging, because if you hinge upon something, and notice I'm not saying Christianity by any means, like it's hard to hinge on to be honest with you, it's harder to hinge on a Latin-based system.
When we talk about this like hinging point thing, it's like the idea of what do you believe in? What is your spiritual system based on in some way that's helpful? And I like it more than the idea of something based on something, because I'm like a very visual learner. So when I envision something like a spiritual practice based on something, we have and then everything kind of grows out of there. But if it's hinged on something, different directions, and this is like very conducive of the idea of like, well, what are extraterrestrials? Like maybe maybe we can go back and look at these things and see other perspectives of it that actually just helps inform us better instead of just branching off into another direction.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Hank.
Thank you so much, Hank, for your kind super chat. Hank says, a lot of people pretend to know what is going on for social status or validation, but can't actually solve any problems. How do I avoid them?
I have a really quick answer for that. Well, Hank, you just avoid them. You know what I mean? If you know that they don't have, if they're doing it for social status or validation, it's you basically just kind of don't give them your energy. Like don't pay attention to that kind of stuff, because it you know, especially in the spiritual community, and you know, even in the bleed through from like the UAP and UFO community in our lives, it's like there's a lot of people that are just, you know, and some are valid in some things and some are not. So that's my personal answer to that. It's you just kind of avoid them. You just, you know that they're doing it for that egoic value rather than the betterment value.
Yeah, it's the idea of using that part of your intuition that sees a situation and looks at it in a deeper way, because this is one of the main caveats of this, Hank. So it's the difference between people who are controlled by their senses and emotions, and that makes mental illness, versus people who can look at a situation and think about it carefully and then decide how you are then going to react to it in a way that can actually help. And we see this so much. A huge part of the problem is that a lot of people have lost the ability to think creatively or do creative things and find validation in doing that kind of, what, for lack of a better word, I don't know, like virtue signaling, you could look at it as, or trying to make it themselves feel like problems are getting solved through emotions, when like, as we know, that doesn't actually solve problems. If anything, it just can make more bad things happen when people react to stuff in that kind of way. And so the first thing is like noticing that there's patterns of behavior in people that act like that, and they'll typically kind of group together. So once you can just take a step aside from that and not get involved. And then that knowing of like, well, what are people's lives actually like when you can see that. And that's something that I always really struggled with in occult communities, where like, because I would often be like in the inner orders of things or whatever, when I would be in different occult groups or whatever, I would get to know people and like really know them beyond how they would be trying to be perceived.
Yeah, the mask.
Yeah, that mask. And so you really can see like, well, is the advice from this person, like, are they actually able to solve a problem? Can they actually solve problems? And what is it like, there's a big, I think, thing where it's just like people feel so powerless. They want to do something. They don't know how to do anything because they've lost the ability to think without emotions controlling them. And then they do all kinds of really like horrible things. Like, I mean, we even saw that this morning and like on the news, where, you know, yet again, another like, you know, person has, you know, like caused like a terror attack. in Germany today, and that happened
Mhm.
where I used to live too, in New Orleans, just like on New Year's, where somebody drove into a crowd of people, and like we're literally living in a world where these kind of things have become like normalized in society, where like obviously people are going to act in this unhinged way where they're trying to focus on trying to know what's going on to solve problems, because people feel so powerless. Like we don't know what's going to happen, and everybody just wants to try to feel like they have some knowing or control over what's going on. And the fact of the matter is stuff is actually like way worse than people even know.
Yeah, they have
And
no idea.
and you know, and really like very often the best way of actually helping people is through doing things like trying to directly help people, like how I made that yoga class video where it's like, okay, literally anyone can watch that and get something out of it. If your body cannot physically do what's in the class, maybe it will inspire you to find something that can.
Mhm.
Also, Hank, thank you for sharing the video. I know you were one of the people that said that you did, and I really appreciate that. I know it's not like an edgy topic, so it doesn't get as much views as other things do on my channel, and like
Yeah.
that is what it is. But
Yeah, you know, and,
yeah.
and and I'll add to that too. It's
Mhm.
like, these practices and ideas and things to include into your life, it shouldn't seem kind of frou-frou or weird. Like I come from a kinesiology background and medical, so it's like I understand how yoga, yes, we can look at it as a physical level as like stretching, but stretching is really good for you. But what is it doing to the energetic lines? What is it doing for your energetic body and like releasing certain things? And how is your breath going into it? And there's so much more to it, to yoga, than there is like just the postures. It's yoga is a practice in itself. Like yoga itself is practice.
Right.
And from the health benefit, it works phenomenally. Even just basic movements, basic stretches, basic postures, and the way your body's aligned allows our kinetic chain. And anybody that would like to know more about kinesiology, you can go and study the kinetic chain in itself and learn an exponential amount of how our body, not only physically but energetically, allows energy to disperse. So it's very important on those levels. So I personally love yoga. You know what I mean? And it's like I know yoga is the best counterpart to meditation, because if you're sitting for meditation for a very long time, you'll probably want to go and do a few stretches. That there's just a way to do it. You know what I mean? But how to continue the focus and the meditative mindset while leaving your state of meditation but entering these asanas is like almost like an art in itself. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because asana is just one of the many limbs of yoga, which also includes things like right action, meditation,
Mhm.
mantra, philosophy. There's so many different aspects of yoga. So that's why I like to think that is my hinging point
Mhm.
changed from a very like experimental point to something that I can
Solidified.
learn from, that's very solid, that I know
And
actually works and is real.
and that's what we
Mhm,
find in Western magic a lot. And then there's no, hating on Western magic. It definitely
mhm,
has its place, but a lot of our Western magic is derived from Eastern systems, and if
mhm.
we understand the Eastern systems deeper, it almost negates the Western mind. And the Western mind is very analytical, and thank God that scholars have come and been able to give us grimoires and their representation of grimoires. But it there's so much more to it. And if you look at various religions like Hinduism or even old languages like Sumerian, they're still talking about God. They're still talking about asuras. They're still talking about these entities or Nephilim or Anunnaki or whatever you want to call them. They're still talking about these other existences and these other realities and dimensions. And they're just using a different language, a different interpretation, a different symbol set, or a different hinging point to understand it. Because if we were all telepathic, we wouldn't be having to sit here and have a talk using English. We could just set on video and just awkwardly stare at everybody on camera for very long periods of time. And they're like, wow, I got downloaded. But we have to use a language. We have to use a lens of understanding what's going on in the inner world. Our lenses are ideology, our hinging point of our dome, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really goes a lot in concert with how we evolve over time
Mhm.
and how things change, and you learn more, and you should always be learning more and growing. And so, like, here's another personal example, because people see the like the growth and changes that have happened here on Cyberwitch. And before I get into that, Dark Angel Gothic Vampire, I hope you have a great day at judo class and at the gym. Thank you so much for popping in
Enjoy.
today. That's awesome that you're doing that. I hope you have a great time. And so when I first got into spirituality, like when I was a teenager, it was very much based in ceremonial magic,
Mhm.
ceremonial magic, and but also tarot. And so tarot and like developing my psychic abilities, that we could look at as very good for being like a hinging point.
Mhm.
But then when it comes to things like why my own personal spiritual practice has changed from it being based in ceremonial magic to based in yoga, is because of a lot of things. One of those things being, I think that there is something to be said for having your hinging point based on a system that people that who are living and have generations of people that have been studying and perfecting and preserving those cultural traditions.
Yeah.
When we look at things like ceremonial magic, when I first started getting into it when I was a teenager, it was so I am 35, and when I first started doing this stuff, you could not go online and find like people that were also doing it, and videos of, there were no like videos of everybody's rituals. And like I got a lot of crap for even just posting pictures of my altars or telling people what was going on in a ritual, like the steps of it. People used to freak out at me when I first made this channel like 14 years ago, and I put Goetia videos up on here. Old occultists came for me for doing that and for showing people what it was like, because it was just different. But
Yeah, but a lot of that has to come with the spirits. Like,
well, yeah, I just
people have like backloaded that so much that they always felt the
yeah,
spirits didn't want it out. The spirits
absolutely,
do want it out.
absolutely. They
Like,
did, they do want it out. And I'm like, my point here being like, I was one of the people that caused the uprising of people recording their videos and putting it on YouTube with like goetic magic. And I saw how that grew over time. And I also saw how something that's based in grimoires that do not have that living legacy of scholars, because when I was getting into it, it would be like, okay, I find this book, I'm going to read it and try to figure out what it means and what the steps are from this old grimoire. It wasn't like, oh, here's like an ashram that has had people studying this since the person was alive
right,
and wrote it.
right.
This is what I'm talking
and that
about.
actually goes
Yeah.
beyond scholars. Like I feel scholars have ruined occultism, like in a massive, massive scale.
Mhm.
And that can go on record. Like any scholar has ruined occultism because they are not practicing. They do not have a practice. Like, go study with a yogi for 5 years and tell me you've not learned more about spirit and energetics and how this stuff works than you would reading a grimoire. And there's living traditions out there, and that Hinduism is one of them, like Sufism is one of them. Like there's traditions that can teach you way more in magic and spirit invocation than a 15th century grimoire where the person didn't even finish, they just died. And I'll put it out pretty basic like that, because there's more gnosis living from current experiences than there ever was during the Elizabethan era.
Yeah, like
Ever.
when I got into old grimoire magic, what we had access to was scholars who had released these books in ways where maybe there's like a bit more modern English, or they try to put it in a different order to help people understand it. But I didn't have like a living tradition from when those things were made that I could just access like I could with yoga. And so
Mhm.
that's also, I'm not saying that those things are bad, because people always love to like twist the things that I say into like a reason for them to create a problem with me. I'm not saying those things are bad at all. I'm saying, like, for me to be able to help people, I needed to make my hinging point based on yoga, because then I can help people more deeply and learn more about things. And also, when it comes to like the Goetic demons and my work with them, I still love them,
Mhm.
and but I also understand that they're and I was thinking a lot about like how I was going to explain this to people today. Um, I have particular things that I am doing, and those demons are contracted to do particular things, and I don't need them to do the things for me
Correct.
that they're contracted to do. So I will still do like spirit evocation for other people if it's something that I actually want to do, which is not much nowadays. But I only like doing things that bring like good stuff into people's lives or like
Mhm.
protect them
Yeah.
and stuff like that, because I really just don't want to touch any kind of like nasty shit. But that being said, like in my own
Islam, because in
practice, I'm
Islam
not
they
doing
call that
that.
rohani or
What does that
rohaniyat.
mean?
The rohaniyat is like,
Mhm.
it's not sihr or like black magic or like negative. It's like, okay, how can we help the person? Like, even if the person like, oh, I don't like my ex and I want this. Like, okay, well, let's look at it from the soul level. Like, what can we do to make you feel better and change your energy? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's amazingly well, because it gives the power back to the person. You know what I mean? And that's what I feel about Hinduism. I love Hinduism. I told you that that was my, after my death experience, it was Buddhism and Hinduism, which I fell upon because of memory. You know, I was like, oh, I remember these things. Okay, I can just do that. You know, and it hits very close to home. That's why all the authors I publish are always kind of based on the Hinduism stuff, and it's a current, and it's very real. But I don't see it any different. So I don't see Hinduism any different than Islam or Sufism. It's just a different understanding of the terminologies, and it's quite beautiful, I feel, because it's all religions and all those hinging points. We're all trying to say the same thing. We're all trying to explain the same thing. And even sometimes we might have an experience where like, oh, that's a demon. It might not be a demon. Maybe it's an asura. Maybe it's a deva. Maybe it's a jinn. Maybe it's an et. But we'll constantly try to label something based on our hinging point and our lens, realistically.
Yeah, and once again, to reiterate, we're not saying that those things are not real. The idea is, how deep can you get with
Hmm.
stuff, and is if that is what you're basing everything on, how deep can you get? How much is that helping your life? How far can you go with it? And is it actually helping you? Or are you developing a situation where you're like worrying about, like, here's the number one collective of things that the people who come to me for spiritual consultations because they need help, they typically have a few main concerns, and all of this comes from hinging points that are on this very obscure knowledge, and that's why people have these concerns. So the concerns are, is this spirit, does it actually like me? Is this spirit actually right for
Hmm.
me? um am I doing enough for this spirit to have the things that I want to have happen? Those are the things that people come to me about all the time. And the problem is, when you're hinging your spiritual practice like on this, you're just going to be draining your energy, because you're not working on your own self and your own energy as literally like the source of everything. All those things are emanating out of you as like literal God.
Hmm?
So it's all about you, baby. And like that's what it
Well,
all comes
and
back to.
and that's why
Yeah.
so many people see different spirits as so many different images and masks, and you know what I mean. Like Archangel Michael looks like something to one person compared to another person, and it's it is all you. It goes down to that deep that it is all you. And these energies exist, these entities and frequencies exist, but
Mhm.
based on you is really how you're going to be able to perceive them. And that's why it's very
Mhm.
important to have a hinging point. And take, for example, like magic squares. We in Western occultism, we have magic squares everywhere in every single grimoire, but I'm sorry to say it's all crap. It's all base stuff. It's not, they don't teach you how to actually program the square or how to utilize it in a gematria fashion. They don't teach you anything. They're like, oh, this is Saturn, blah 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 blah. This is a line that I drew through the square. Look at this. I drew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just okay, cool. Like a 3-year-old can figure this out if you put it in front of them long enough. How can I program it? How can I distill it if I put a spirit's name into it? Like let's say we want to work with Anubis. How can we put Anubis into the square and be able to distill its elemental, its planetary correlations, and the actual names hinged on whether it be Hebrew or Arabic or runes or whatever? How can we distill it and know what to say when we're calling the energy? And we don't really find that unless we hinge on some kind of system that's within our human dome. You know what I mean? And you can find that, to me personally, through more of like the expanded 28, 27, 28 letter Hebrew alphabet and the Arabic 28 letter alphabet, because it's going to hinge tighter upon the.
Because English used to have more letters, and they
It
got rid of a
did.
whole bunch of them.
Yeah, English used to have 28 too.
Yeah.
Shocking. Why would they do that? 28 lunar mansions, planets, 7. You know what I mean? In a workable order. Yes, there's 9 planets, but 7 in the occult order, and 4 elements. 7 times 4 is 28. There has to be a natural order of occult science. If there is no natural of occult science, you're just sitting there shooting blanks in the air. It's not a actual system and hinging point. And that's why I find value in a lot of systems, albeit I'm not a big fan of like the Hebrew letters, because everybody's using 22, and please tell me how that magically fits into a planetary and elemental system. It makes no sense. But it always has to be 28. Even Sanskrit, I'll even dare people to go into Sanskrit. They have tons of letters, but mathematically put them all out, and you will find some very interesting woven patterns to like the 9 planets, even beyond. It's quite beautiful, and that's where it comes from, a hinging point. We have to have a hinging point to understand our perceptual lens. And if we can't explain the things that are happening, or our magic and our practice is not bettering our life, then maybe it's not good for you.
Yeah. Also, I think people like to be in denial over like literally whatever it is that you're doing spiritually. Because of, if you put a lot of time into it, it's just like a bad relationship, right?
Mhm.
Like you put a lot of time into something, so you keep giving it a chance to try to fix it, because you've put so much effort and energy into it. And this happens a lot with spiritual practices. And like that, the reason why I really like yoga is because it helps me to develop all the different limbs of spiritual control. So if I do want to summon a spirit, then I'm going to do a better job of that.
Your energetic body's a hell of a lot strong enough to be
Mhm.
able to hold it, and it's so important. Plus, how does it make you feel?
That's actually so important.
You know?
Like, let's talk about for a second the idea of when we're making contact with these powerful entities
Mhm.
through either like accident, or you're doing some severe spell.
Oops.
And like the effect that actually has on your physical body. Because if people are hinging their practice on like spirit evocation as the central facet, and you're not doing work on your own energy,
Yeah,
you are going to get
detrimental.
drained. It's not the spirit. The spirit isn't trying to hurt you and drain
Mm-mm.
you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the frequencies of you making contact with these powerful beings will drain you. Just like in the Seth material, where Jane Roberts
Yeah.
passes away like at a not very old age, because she was constantly channeling this
She was so
extraterrestrial.
drained.
Yeah, and that drained her, and it made her life really short.
It was a sacrifice.
Right. But
No.
and so no, of course, no, that like we're not
Uh-oh.
and also I am not telling or condoning people to sacrifice their energy
No.
or life to spirits. We're giving this an example of someone who was a fantastic writer and passed away
She's wonderful
at a young age.
Yeah,
Deep contact with aliens.
For those don't know, the Seth material is a really good set of material. I always say great information, questionable source. I don't know, questionable source, but it's really good information. I can't say the source because I wasn't there with Jane Roberts, but it's what she put out was quite amazing, and I really liked it. It's one of the books that it changed me. It was very hard for me to read Seth Speaks because that book came to me after my death experience, and I was at a bookstore, and no joke, this book just kind of went out of the bookshelf, and I was like, what's this? And I grabbed it, and
your gesturing is shaking everything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And I was like, it just vibrated in my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is something, and I started reading the first 30, 40 pages, and I had to put it down and stop reading it because it was basically saying everything that I was already hearing in my head from my guides. And I was like, oh wow. I was like, this is beautiful. So it was the only book that I ever read. And at the time, it was the only book I was reading. And I could only get through a page or two at a time because it almost set me through this minor psychosis. I was like, oh my God, what is going on? Is it exactly what I'm hearing all day in my head from these other things, and they considered it a process of tuning. That's what they called it, was tuning. But yeah, that works is phenomenal. But
yeah, absolutely. No, I don't hear voices in my head. I have worked professionally as a psychic and clairvoyant, helping people with continual repeat customers for the past almost 20 years. Yeah. So I'm not just hearing voices.
If people are actually hearing physical voices, if people are actually hearing physical voices, a lot of the times that's actually V2K technology or voice to skull technology, where the physical audible sounds are happening. So it's.
Yeah, you want to look into that. If
you're hearing physical voices, we have to understand the inner domains are all psychic. It's all psychic intuition and psychic hearing. And I will say that all those inner senses are connected to the throat, the third eye, and the crown. It has nothing to do with the lower four centers. So if you're having a hard time paying attention to inner hearing or inner sight or receiving messages or guidances or these psychic impressions, whether it be audibly through thought or telepathy, you have to be able to work on those centers. If you're not working on those centers, then you're just not going to touch on the energy.
Yeah, or if you're someone who is addicted to hardcore substances as well, and in denial about that, that's also the thing. It's it doesn't matter what you do to try to change your spiritual practice. If you're doing something that's rotting your brain and causes mental illness, then how are you going to act like that's not the source of what your problem is?
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, people that are actually have let's say schizophrenia or various forms of schizophrenia or mental illness, and they're in psych wards and stuff like that. Sometimes what they're going through is actually a Kundalini experience or a premature Kundalini experience. And you can rehab these people to bring their brain back into balance. You can. And I have people that take my classes and work with my material that utilize this in their actual psychotherapy practice. And if you understand that those kind of mental imbalances is really these people are seeing and experiencing something psychically that they're just not able to physically explain.
Yeah.
A lot of times. But if it's telling you to kill somebody and, or unalive somebody or do something like that, that's bad. You know what I mean? You have to look at the sources. But there's some people that are, put away and put on medication that are just absolutely brilliant. And they might just sit there and draw in a notebook about all these weird symbols and diagrams and be like, I know what this means. You don't. It's all that inner thing,
Yeah, absolutely. And with Moonfire's question about, she's asking about what is my most interesting experience working with my customers, or I'm not gonna talk in the details about what because they're my patients, right? I'm not gonna talk details about
confidentiality
about things that I thought were weird that happened to people, because it's really personal. But one thing that I like talking about, and I know that because the lady has like I've talked to her about it. There's one lady that is one of my most exciting things that I like is I helped someone change her life, like her entire career and life situation over the course of several years of us working together. And this is someone who already has like a family like later in her life, like very well developed, and did all these things. And like you'd think like, oh well, at this point in life, like my life is what it is. But like watching the transformation and how she was able to like even go back to school and start doing all these new things that she really always wanted to do, in the peak of the plague as well, which was like the catalyst for all of that. That's when I had started working on that with her. Like that's one of the things that I like telling people about, because I think society kind of wants us to just settle for things.
Yeah. And I think it goes down to like, to me personally too, I think like the best and most like interesting customer experience, or I don't like calling people customers, but it's like that kind of experience is honestly people that do the work. That to me is just the most interesting, because
when people
if you're doing the work, if you
do
take my
things,
class and actually do the work, you're going to have the results. And then if you
it's
do
amazing.
that, that's
yeah,
so amazing to me.
right?
Like
Because
that is interesting.
We know it works. Like
yeah,
if you,
that is interesting.
We know that if you follow the things that we were taught and do, it will work and cause change, and that's always going to be like a unique experience for whoever that is. But absolutely. Yeah.
Moonfire also says, like, she says, or I don't know what there, but
Mhm.
I block out telepathy because I have too many intrusions from V2K. I tell spirits to talk to me in dreams so I can block out the others. Yeah, and V2K is a very real thing. And Moonfire, if you're using like, like the violet protections and various other protections, like even like in Asaya Alexa and things that we've talked about, a V2K works on a certain frequency range that the violet spectrum of color is actually a higher vibration to it. So it actually negates it. It's not going to block everything. It's a filter, so it's a really good way to start kind of shielding up against those kind of intrusions, because I way back when, especially after my death experience and coming back, the V2K and the synthetic bombardment of ELF and satellite transmissions were pretty intense.
Yeah, I think the primary elements comment on like, so you think there's no way to resist demonic possession? This is a very important thing that everyone needs to think about. Like, it doesn't matter how advanced you are, there's always going to be forces that are trying to fuck with your head that come from, like, I think I talked about this like two videos ago, like on the main videos of the channel. There's forces that are caused by spiritual stuff. There's forces that are caused by machinery. There's forces that are caused by spiritual machinery. All these things are trying to mess with people all the time. If you are very sensitive, you will notice it more. And also things can be sent at you to make it worse. But there's always stuff that you can do to resist it, but you have to not be lazy. And you have to work to make yourself strong.
Correct. Yeah. And that's really what it goes down to. And that's the best resistance to like demonic possession or any kind of possession, is if your energetic body is not strong and you do not have strong will, and you also
hard.
said something, the primary element also says something like, I love the idea of forging an iron will and strong mind. And that's really the key. If you understand what you are as at a soul level, we're talking the highest level, who are they? Who are they? And this is where you have to assert, in a sense, like a certain dominance. Yes, not ego, but you have to assert your understanding of what you are, who you are, and not giving in to the lower frequencies and vibrations, which usually bring in quote unquote demonic possession. And I feel that things that usually end up possessing somebody is usually not like a demon. I think that's more of like just a label we throw at it. But I think demons probably have better things to do than
right. Absolutely. Unless you're in an actual ritual where people who know what they're doing are doing that. Like I have experienced those things, like when I lived in New Orleans and I was part of like different ATRs and I got to see that. But those are people that were very experienced. It's like a whole ceremony, and that's part of it. But that yeah, like we can call things demonic and it will still have the same kind of idea where it's like these are things that are trying to usurp people's minds, make them make bad choices and decisions, and trigger people to be controlled by their pleasure senses and emotions. And this is literally what all like the Vedic texts talk about. It's not nothing new. This is literally the nature of the world we live in. And some people are just figuring it out now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom applies says, I had a mirror that was a portal. When a priest blessed it, the holy water evaporated and the priest got freaked out and doused it violently while praying. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, and I had a black mirror that I consecrated and put in an old place that I was living at. And when it came down to taking it down to move it, I had to use tons of paint on the wall to cover up a lot of the symbols. And the craziest thing is it started bleeding. Like you could see red drip down from the circles. And by the way, I didn't use the color red anywhere in this thing, you know, and it was just paint. So black paint, and how it came to be actually like this red bleeding out of the 10 coats of Kills primer was absolutely insane, you know.
Yeah,
like,
that is amazing.
Yeah.
I'll yeah, sure, I'll give you some. Like when I very first started, like I don't really like have like a list of all the rituals I've done and their result in like some, because it's been like 20 years for me, but since people like to act like it's not real, so I when I first started doing rituals, and now the way that I do rituals now is different because I don't ask for this kind of stuff, because my life is more focused on just helping people and getting better at learning yoga. So that's literally what my focus is. But before, I really wanted to be like a famous artist, and I also had all these problems in my life. So I worked with Ars Goetia when I was having to leave an apartment, and I only had like a week and it was really hard to find a place. Well, I worked with the Goetia, and then I got the most amazing affordable apartment in just like literally 2 days. And the whole thing was super weird. Like nobody else had gone to look at it. It didn't even have a picture. And it was just like the most amazing apartment ever. So like that happened. Another amazing thing that happened just even during that period of time. When I was 24, I did a spell to try to help my art career, and I got accepted into the Society for Art of Imagination, which is like a super prestigious surrealist art organization. And I did art shows with H.R. Geiger and Alex Gray. And I was like, wow, these are like the things that people dream about. And then I had all that stuff happen to me. I had my whole life change around to the things that I wanted to have happen. I made a whole bunch of money. And then I realized like, this isn't really appealing to me anymore to like just to live like that, because it creates this void in you where you just keep like wanting more and more things. And then you're like, well, what's the point of life? Like, is it just like wanting things to have happen? Like that's so depressing. Like I don't want my life to just be about like trying to make something in the future happen to make it better. I just want my life to be like I feel like happy and loved like on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I like. And so that's really what I do now. So I'm not trying to like do rituals to make stuff happen for me. I do them for people if it's something that I want to help them with, but it's rare.
But the thing is, I mean, rituals so vague, really. Like a ritual could be you sitting for 20 minutes doing a mantra.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm
like
saying? So
ritual can be really defined in a lot of things, right?
I will say, when I was spending 15 hours of meditation a day, it was not just me sitting there. It was a ritual happening on the astral, and I was doing things, you know. So the whole ritual thing is, you know, it's not always about what you want, but the ritual also goes into how can we create something to happen immediately. You know what I mean? Like whether it be spiritually or spirit contact, or, you know, creating things in your life, you know. So a ritual is a mantra. If you're sitting for 20 minutes lighting a candle and doing a mantra and blowing on a knot for 20 minutes doing the mantra, that's a ritual.
Everyone in major religions are doing rituals. What they're doing is the ritual.
When you're drinking the wine, eating
spiritual thing that people do, that's a spiritual routine. That's all a ritual. It is. We're just calling it by a different word, but that's what it is. I mean, like if you look at it.
And even in Islam, when they're all walking around counterclockwise around Mecca, that's a ritual. You have thousands of people walking around this black cube, and they're all chanting and doing their zikrs and mantras. That's a ritual. I don't care how anybody says it. It's a real thing.
Yeah. So the main thing for people to take away from this today, and I think we should probably get going in 5 minutes because you do have some classes you need to teach for people. So we're going to be a little short on this week's stream because Vermilion has people to teach. And if you would like to learn from him or me, or check out our online video classes, all that stuff's linked in the description of this video. You can find his website, thevioletgateway.com, as well as the links to stuff on my website. But the main thing is, like, to take away from this is, what is your spiritual practice based on?
How is it helping you?
How is it helping you? What do you actually believe in? And what room is there in what your spiritual practice contains for it to grow in different directions for you to learn more? And like, just really think about that.
And also think about if it helps your perceptual lens. Like if it's not helping your perceptual lens to understand something, and you're studying, let's say you're studying Greek, and it's just not helping you do your perceptual lens proper, then it's not working for you. Maybe try some other type of thing that's going to be closer to your awareness. So
yeah.
Wonderful.
Cool. Well, I hope that that you all enjoyed today's class, and I hope that you will subscribe if you're new. Please share these videos with everyone you know. Please also check out my yoga video to help you wake up in the morning and give it a try and share it with your friends. And check out all the links below if you would like help from us via either like a video class on your own time, or if you need direct help. Like I mentioned earlier in the chat today, I help people with spiritual counseling. So if you want direct help from me, you can get a consultation through the link on my website, or anything else, just find it below if you need help. And I hope you take care. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.